Hello and welcome to another episode of RTAF Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Norris. This week we've got the incredible Andrew Davis as a guest on the podcast. Andrew is a painter who creates amazing paintings and has a solo show coming up this week on May 15th at Ryan Joseph Gallery here in Denver, Colorado. Be sure to check that out. I'll put links in the description to the event page where you can get all the necessary info. He's excited, I'm excited, you're excited. And on this episode, we talk about Andrew's history of growing up in Virginia, dropping out of art school, some former jobs he had, and how mental health influenced his decision to become a full-time artist. We also go in depth on several of his paintings and their meanings and motifs. Patreon subscribers will see what we're talking about in the video version. And if you're interested in supporting the podcast, please head on over to patreon.com/RTAF podcast. Link in the description and on whatever social media posts you will find about this episode. I need your support. No lie, no cap, as they say. So if you want to give it, head on over there. It's $4 to $16 a month. There's 3 tiers. You get a video regardless of what tier you're subscribing to. And there are other benefits like merch and guest suggestions and special little posts that I throw in there. Anyway, this episode's really great. Just a quick note. The first 26 minutes of this episode, I only got the Zoom recording. So my audio is a little computer laptop microphone kind of thing going on. But at around 26 minutes, kick in with the microphone, this very microphone that you're listening to now. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. Anyway, enjoy this episode. Andrew Davis, welcome. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Sweet. So usually, I usually start these interviews off kind of getting the person's backstory, getting the artist's backstory or what led them to creating art. But I want to put it in the context to go like as far back as like childhood if possible. So one question I found useful is, what was your childhood like? Were you a weird kid?
I was definitely weird and I guess a normal kind of way. I grew up in Virginia, in rural Virginia. Originally, I'm from a town that's about 25,000 people. And it's been that way for years. There's not a lot of change. There's not a lot of new things that happen there. And I think when I was really young, I could feel the boundaries that were kind of established in that area and that community.
Mm-hmm.
And as a younger person, I was always like testing those boundaries just to see what was acceptable and what wasn't. And so that came with a lot of like style changes, hair changes, idea changes, political mindsets, just religious ideas, everything. I was just testing everything just to see what was considered normal or acceptable or anything like that. And I think that's definitely one of the things that fed my creativity when I was younger, was testing all those boundaries.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like the concept of boundaries to be tested is definitely, I feel like that's the artist's job in kind of a way. And even like looking to your work, like a lot of what I see in your work is boundary dissolving and there's no clear delineation in a good way, in a very like creative, like fun way.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's interesting. Like, I didn't grow up in a super small town, but it was like it's like medium sized, but it was in Kentucky. Very probably kind of the same flavor of gentility, or you know
I
what I
think
mean?
so. Yeah.
And yeah, I had a little bit different path, but I it was just so normal to the point that it just like boggled my mind, you know?
Yeah.
It just got
Yeah.
like frustrating. It's like everything's just so average and normal or whatever. So uh I guess that's a long-winded way of saying I feel you.
Yeah, that's definitely the fuel, because when you see a lot of people generally acting in a similar fashion, you just kind of have to wonder why.
Mhm.
Especially the more that you learn about the world and different cultures and things, um,
Yeah,
it makes you question, well, why do they act that way? And everybody that I know acts this way. And I think, the more creative you are, the more likely you are to start blending those boundaries and adopting new things that normally you wouldn't have the chance to,
totally.
you know?
So you kind of answered this question, but is there anything more specific that attracted you to making art or making paintings in the first place?
Uh, Not particularly. I think when I was in high school was when I first started to take it kind of seriously. Um, and I think a lot of that is because I didn't really feel like doing anything else. It seemed like the area where I could be the most free with my thoughts and my time, and you know what I wanted to do. Um, I I think I just didn't feel like doing anything else, and I took it more seriously when I realized that I could uh, kind of combine it with other hobbies and passions that I had.
Mhm.
Like when I was in high school, the Lord of the Rings came out, and I was a huge fantasy nerd at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember watching I had like the extended collection, and in the like the extras, they had this one video that was about concept art. And that's when a light kind of went off, and I was like, what? You can make a living drawing elves and dwarves and shit like that? And I think that's really what set it off. And I started going on a search for ways to learn concept art, and um, I actually ended up spending a lot of time on a place called conceptart.org.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
Come to find out, years later, I met Android Jones at Threda, I think like a year and a half ago. And I was telling when was first introduced to his work on conceptart.org way back in the day, and it just kind of clicked in my head because I was talking to him about it. He's like, "Oh, I created that website." Like,
Yeah.
it blew my mind that in some sort of like secondary way, he launched my creative endeavors purely just by putting that out there and letting people join, which was really cool.
Yeah, that's so awesome. That's a cool example of like just this complete circle of cause and effect,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, that's like poetry. I love when things like that happen in life, when things
Yeah.
click.
Yeah, yeah, same here. That it just always blows my mind to think like if certain events hadn't happened the exact way that they did happen, then X, Y, and Z would be even a reality, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so did you go to school for art or
I
any
did.
formal
Yeah,
school?
after I graduated from high school, I actually took a year off because still I had that kind of interest in art, but it wasn't like set concretely yet. I
Mhm.
didn't know if I really wanted to try and go for it because when you read all the statistics, you're way more likely to fail than you ever are to succeed. And when you have to weigh that, and then also possibly tens of thousands of dollars on the other end, it's a really difficult decision to finalize in your mind. So I took a year off and kind of hitchhiked, and I hiked part of the Appalachian Trail for a while, and started landscaping. I worked in a landscaping job for about 10 years of my life. And then after a year of all that, it just got, well, it's like, what else am I going to do?
Yeah.
Am I just going to wander around, like a cloud, or am I going to focus on something and try and make something of it? So I ended up going to Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. I originally went for communication arts, which is essentially their way of saying illustration. It's like illustration, borderline graphic design. So I attended that for about 2 years, and then ended up dropping out. At some point I felt like I had had enough and got everything I needed, and just dipset from that.
Nice. So did you ever end up going back or finishing it, or you just got what you needed and you were like, all right, peace?
Yeah. That was it for me. I remember when I decided I was going to quit too, because I was taking one of the courses. I forget what exactly it was. We had to do a lot of sketchbooking and stuff, and the teacher would ask us to fill up like 15 pages every week, and we had to have like 3 different sketchbooks at the time. And I remember he was looking through everybody's sketchbooks at the front of the class, and at one point he just angrily put one of them down, and he said, you guys don't have to be here if you don't want to be here. And then, like we were saying earlier, that's when it clicked.
Yeah.
It just clicked in my head. I was like, oh yeah, you're right. You're don't want to be here.
Yeah.
And so I got up and I left the class, and then I never went to class again.
Wow.
That was the end of it.
Wow, nice. Also, I just wanted to say before we kind of move on from this subject, like I think it's so wise that you took a year off. I was kind of like sort of rushed or pressured into college by my family, more or less. And that was back when like there was still some sort of illusion that like college was completely necessary for your your financial independence as an adult. But yeah, I just think that it would be so cool that if this were just more of a regular thing to take like a year, maybe even 2 years off before making like a huge decision like that.
Yeah. And I think that's the normal cases in some places. Like I think in Europe, it's pretty normalized that people take a year off before they decide to jump right in. Because I mean, at 18, you're still kind of a kid for the most part. Still, I mean, you don't know shit from shit for the most part.
Yeah.
So I think it definitely makes sense to take your time before you make a huge decision like that. Even though I literally just said the other day or earlier that, I got up and left class at the drop of a hat and never went back. But, it's easier to do that than to start it, for sure, as with most things.
Yeah. And sometimes things just come together like that. Things just do click like that. And when it happens, like, like if college isn't clicking or whatever it just isn't clicking like that, then you might want to wait or just like see what happens.
Yeah. Thankfully I have pretty accepting parents. When I told them I didn't want to go to college right away, they were okay with it, completely supporting that.
Nice.
When I told them I wanted to quit, they were okay with that. And they kind of allowed me to screw up or to succeed in the ways that kind of fit what I was doing. It helps that I have 2 brothers that came before, and they kind of got on more successful paths.
Yeah.
They paved the way a little bit.
They were like, oh, he'll figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. We've already got two that worked out, The third one's just extra.
Yeah.
Bonus kid.
Well, yeah, I want to pivot here just a little bit and talk about your work. I think I have these photos you sent me pulled up here. Let's see. So screen share screen. Again, more technical things I'm figuring out here on the fly. Here we go.
Yeah.
We will. This. There. So yeah, let's see. We've got. Yeah. So anyway, I kind of want to just talk about the process first of how you make work. And I see a lot of kind of like references to art history maybe in your work.
Yeah.
So I guess my question about your process specifically is when you sit down to make a painting, do you have any sort of like ideas in mind beforehand, or are you just kind of free flowing and then pulling from what you know, or maybe what you've seen?
Yeah. It's definitely a combination of the two.
Nice.
Early on, it was definitely a go with the flow type of thing. It was, mainly just exploring my imagination, exploring the moment. When something hit, then you kind of record that, you put that down. And over time, as I was making more and more paintings, not every time when you work with the process of the flow will it really work. Some
Yeah.
you have good days, you have bad days, and on the bad days when it's not working, it's it can be make things tedious.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Well, go for it.
So over time, I just kind of started to realize that I needed to make things more concrete so that on the days when I wasn't feeling as focused, I could really just not mindlessly go ahead, but I could trudge forward and, I had a goal in mind that I could get to instead of, just sitting there wondering what my goal was.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's super important. I've learned more or less the same thing in making paintings, and even like with the podcast, like just having a roadmap of it doesn't have to be a particular pinpoint destination, but just having something to guide you along the path when you're creating something, whether it's a motif or just questions. In terms of the podcast, I used to just go into it and just be like, we'll just have a conversation. Sometimes the awkward moments are too awkward.
Yeah.
Like I can handle a certain level of awkwardness. We're artists.
Yeah, plenty awkward. Plenty
but,
awkward.
But yeah, I've found that just having something to, like this skull here. You are seeing that, right? You're seeing your own work.
Actually, I'm not.
You're not. Shit. Let's see. And this is where I'm learning. Let's see. This is my growth edge here, as they say. Let's see. I'll stop share. Okay, now I'm back. Let's advanced sharing options. Okay. Let's see. What about now? Is that?
Hey, yeah, I can see it now.
Okay, sweet. And so, so this one's called Webster 4.
Yeah. This one started with like well, the inspiration was from a T.S. Eliot poem
Mhm.
called Whispers of Immortality. And Webster is I think a playwright that T.S. Eliot was referencing in it. And basically the poem is about, or partly about, his obsession with death. One of those being essentially planted in the ground after you die, and then having daffodil bulbs growing like through your skull and out of the ground. So that was the main inspiration for this painting.
Yeah. Oh. Okay. So this is St. Anthony's Fire, right?
Yeah.
So I looked up St. Anthony's Fire because I was curious as to like where that came from, and I found out about the ergot fungus infection people would get
Yeah.
from eating like just bad rye bread back in the day.
Yeah.
And so is that St. Anthony there?
Yeah. The reference is or the painting reference I used was a Rembrandt painting.
Nice.
But the idea was that it would be somebody going through St. Anthony's Fire. And Saint Anthony was a saint. And the story goes that he went on essentially sabbatical, became a hermit, living in a shack out in the middle of the woods. And him being poor and not having that much to eat, he kind of had to scrounge up whatever he could. There's actually a great novel about it from Flaubert, where the thing that he has to eat is this old black moldy bread. And so at the beginning of the day, he takes a few bites of the bread, and over the course of the day, he starts succumbing to the psychedelic nature of the ergot. And the path, it's similar to like Dante's Inferno or the Divine Comedy, where he kind of descends into hell, for better or for worse, and he travels through, and then ultimately comes in contact with various memories from his past, hallucinations of people that he knows, and then he ends up having a conversation with God, and then the various gods, all the gods, and then ultimately the universe itself. And then at the end, he starts coming back down to his real life and, kind of reflecting on everything that happened. I always thought that was a really interesting, like magical spiritual journey, or the story of it at least. It has everything in it. It has every theme. It has every, human element that you can possibly think of. And in a lot of psychedelic experiences, I feel like, those are things that can crop their heads up every once in a while,
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I guess to give a little context, in case somehow any of my listeners don't know about ergot, it's basically what would you say? It's like one of the natural building blocks in synthesizing LSD, right? Is that a good?
I think that it was originally what Hoffman used to synthesize LSD too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
that's the precursor.
Is it, hasn't it been implicated in like the Salem witch trials? Like people were eating ergotized bread and, seeing a woman cross the street in this psychedelic state or whatever, and thinking she was walking funny, and then going into their minds and, with the Christian ideology embedded in there, being like, oh, she's a witch. She's a witch.
I can believe that. I mean, honestly, that's the only way that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Maybe if they would have eaten a little more, they would have, had some St. Anthony experiences.
Yeah. God would have come down and been like, whoa.
Time
Witches
out,
aren't real. Come on. Get it together.
Yeah. So yeah, I really love this painting, man. It looks like you're using maybe some palette knife in there.
Yeah, a little bit of everything.
Hmm.
Um, Brushwork, palette knives, paper towels, using my fingers, smearing thing around. It really just kind of whatever the moment calls for, I'll end up using
Nice.
a lot of palette knife smearing though. Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. So do you think you've learned more like after going to school that like just on your own?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Uh, I didn't even learn painting from school. I had to teach that to myself. Uh,
Uh,
since it was an illustration class, I think later on they started to teach people oil painting. But I dropped out before I got to that point. I also dropped
mhm.
out before the business classes, which I actually wish I had taken those instead.
Yeah,
Um, so after dropping out, I pretty much had to pick up and learn painting on my own. And so I definitely learned a lot more than I ever did it in school.
nice. And you said you were doing like landscaping for about a like 10-year period.
Yeah.
When did you, and maybe what was it, if there were anything in particular that made you step away from that gig and just be like, no, I can figure out how to do this just by making paintings.
Um, Depression, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, after it's hard work. Um, and after a long time of doing landscaping, day in, day out, there was even a period of time where I worked a second job at night. So I would do landscaping during the day, and then I worked at a movie theater at night. And then somewhere in between, I had to find time to paint. And it was just becoming more and more difficult.
Hmm.
And I found myself uh, drinking more than painting, honestly.
Hmm.
And that made it even worse. And about 3 years ago, it kind of came to a head where I just decided that I had to change something. This isn't the healthiest or most inspiring, or it just wasn't working anymore. And I knew that something had to change significantly. And so about 3 years ago, my girlfriend Grace and I decided that we were just going to take our whatever we had, stuff it into a car, whatever didn't fit, toss it out. And then we drove from Virginia all the way to California, in search of something. And in California, we ultimately found high rent prices. So we ended up going to Texas after that, maybe trying Austin. And then essentially as like a last ditch, we decided to go to Denver because I knew a couple people there, none more than that. Uh, and so we went up there and tried to make it work. And thankfully, we're able just to eke by and get a place in Denver.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing like feeling bad and wanting to change it that'll make you take action in that kind of a way.
Yeah. Misery is a great motivator
Yeah,
for sure.
definitely. Definitely. Um, so let's see. We'll just go through all these if that's cool. We
Cool with me.
can make it quick. Let's see. And so this one, I guess we can talk about these next two in the context of the show you've got coming up in Denver.
Um, on what is it? May 14th, 15th?
Yeah. May 15th
Nice.
at Ryan Joseph Gallery in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah. Yeah. Very excited for
Super,
that.
super excited for it.
Yeah. Ryan's a great dude. Shout out to him and for making this happen and bringing you back around Denver.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I would be able to be where I am today without Ryan. Ryan Connell. Somehow we connected about 5 years ago, and ever since we've been building a great friendship and business relationship together. So definitely shout out to Ryan, big time.
Yeah. So okay, so this one's called Medusa.
Yeah.
And so tell me about this one, if you don't, if you feel like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Medusa is part of the new series that I have coming up. The series itself is called Natura Naturans, which is based off of a philosophical concept by Spinoza. Basically, him saying that the whole universe or multiverse or whatever is essentially out there is it comes in two modes. It comes in naturing, like the motion of everything, and then natured, which is the outcome. So there's the process and then there's the outcome. And when I first learned about that concept, I honestly didn't even understand it. And the more I thought about it, the more it started to, again, like click.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at a lot of Renaissance paintings at the time, and a lot of the, other than biblical paintings, a lot of them, there was like a revival in Greek art or the appreciation of Greek mythology at that time. And it took me a little while to really figure out what the draw was for people to make paintings of Greek mythology, even, hundreds of years after it was, popular. And people were still actually celebrating and worshiping these kind of ideas. And I came across the ideas of Carl Jung, and he said that in the psyche of all humanity, there are these archetypes. And these archetypes are essentially modes of God that are represented in people.
Yeah.
And then it started to make sense why people would talk about mythology. And Medusa in particular was an interesting one to me because something about her gaze could stop a man cold.
Yeah.
And when you think about that in the context of your life, I mean, I'm sure we've all had our experiences with people that, just their gaze alone will stop us cold.
Yeah.
And so taking that kind of inspiration, I started to play with it and add my own elements to it. And this is what came from it.
Nice. Yeah. I see the gaze up there as like is kind of the focal point, but then it's like you're blending the gazer with the person she's gazing at, and you kind of have this kind of darkened profile, but then it definitely, now that you explain it, it definitely reads as kind of like being stopped cold or turning into something other than a human, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like
they're like being infatuated. Like it's the only thing you can think about.
Yeah.
So much so that it just takes over your head.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really into Carl Jung and the collective unconscious and the archetypes. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I really like the part about how he says that if you don't realize that these archetypical, I guess, sort of mind psyche structures are present within you, then you can just act them out in a way that you're not even aware of.
Yeah.
I always found like psychology super interesting. Especially him.
Yeah. I think that's one of those things. It's, when you talk about, psychiatry along with psychology, it's when there's, in some cases, it feels like, when these myths are out of control or these like aspects of yourself are out of control, it feels like you can't function.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the times I like to take these myths and break them apart and pit them against each other and, you know, because ultimately I think in modern day life, we're a conflicted people. The
Oh yeah.
modern humans are pulled every which direction all the time.
Oh
And
yeah.
it feels like you can have overlapping mythologies fighting for your attention at any point,
Very
conflicting
true.
and contradicting and making your life into some sort of paradox that you can't understand anymore.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to regroup, round up the cavalry.
For sure. Yeah, I think part of the problem with that too is that we're just being like kind of lied to constantly by everyone and everything.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of hard to make sense of the world, and that leads to confusion, which yeah, exactly. There is a lot of inherent paradox in reality for sure, but there's also manipulators using massive technologies to convince us of things that aren't true.
Yeah.
Not to get too
Discombobulate.
soapboxy or anything, but
It's a fact at this point.
yeah. Okay, so and this is the last one. This one's called Discord. Um, man, just go for it. Tell me about this painting.
This one is inspired by a painting that I saw. I think it's in a museum in Chicago School of Art, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a painting of Mars. Well, it was originally a painting of Mars, essentially whipping Cupid.
Ouch.
Yeah, he was kind of pissed off because Cupid shot an arrow and hit Mars, and Mars ended up falling in love with I think Venus.
Makes sense.
Who was Mars was the embodiment of war, and Venus was the embodiment of love, I believe. And Mars was, I guess, so distraught by that he took out his anger on Cupid, even though Cupid being Cupid, he didn't know all that much better because he's always blind. He can't see where he's shooting. He's just kind of directed. And so I thought it's an interesting idea for Mars to be taking out his anger on someone that ultimately gave him something beautiful or forced him into a beautiful situation.
Yeah.
And it actually reminds me of a song. I can't even remember what it was, but I think the line goes something like, "I don't want to fall in love again," or "I don't want to fall in love."
Yeah.
I forget who sings it. But everybody, I'm sure, has experienced that when you end up out of a relationship and then after a while you're kind of on your own, and then you feel the inklings again for somebody and you're like, oh shit, here it goes again.
Yeah.
But it's a fascinating archetype for sure.
Yeah, it's almost like war is preferable over the pain of war is preferable over the pain of love or love lost.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, it's somehow, I guess, war makes more sense to people. Who knows why?
I feel like that kind of thing is like biological. It has to be like.
Yeah, I think it's a representation of the territorial nature of primates, most likely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You kind of, when you have these two social or cultural bodies causing friction with each other, it'd be similar to, tribes or groups of monkeys banding together to take over another square mile of the forest or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we're always living in a state of confusion, it's probably harder to use our prefrontal cortex. I would imagine. I don't know. That's just spitballing over here.
Makes sense to me.
So yeah, thanks for sharing and for going down that lane with me. I know sometimes it can be, for me at least, kind of weird to talk about my paintings. Not weird, but tedious maybe. So thanks for doing that.
I get that. I mean, you think about it constantly
Yeah.
on your own time. I think it's easier for me because I've had a good bit of removal from it, because I made these paintings last year in preparation for the show. The show was originally going to happen, I believe, in May of 2020.
Mm.
And then, of course, the world decided to change without my permission, and as it does.
Yeah.
And so we've had to wait until finally this month we get to have the show. So I think I have that little bit of distance from it where I can kind of think of it afresh.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Exciting.
For sure. So yeah, I notice again, just to take it back to the art history thing, I notice a lot of that in there. Do you have a particular like favorite period of art history that you're drawn to?
I love the Renaissance. I love the Baroque period. I think the Baroque is probably my favorite because it's kind of a blend of some of the fanciful ideas of the Renaissance, but then there was a huge wave of realism that happened then.
Mm-hmm.
And so the works that were created during that time period are just mind-boggling and impressive,
Mm-hmm.
Especially like nowadays when you're working on something, you can use Photoshop, you can use a camera,
Yeah.
even.
Yeah.
You can take reference.
Right.
You could use a projector if you wanted to. You can use tape.
Yeah.
But somehow these people were so honed that they could make work that was astounding like that. So that kind of is definitely a huge inspiration for me.
Nice.
So yeah.
Do you have an artist from that time period that people might not know about, or maybe people do, that would be a good supplement to maybe see where your work kind of pulls inspiration from?
Ingra, Dominic Ingra, or August Dominic Ingra.
Let me write that down, actually. How do you spell that?
Let me look it up.
Nice.
August. I know his last name is spelled Ingres,
Oh, okay. Nice.
which I could even be mispronouncing it. I don't know. Yeah, Jean August Dominic Ingres.
Wow.
And you'll see I've noticed a huge wave of contemporary artists recently referencing his work, and it's kind of fascinating to kind of notice when these trends of people appreciating art history kind of coalesce. Because I've noticed a lot of people referencing his paintings these days.
Nice. I'll have to check him out. I'll definitely put links to his work in the show description.
His Instagram, his social media.
Maybe just his Wikipedia. Or do they, I just had a thought. It would be cool to have like just I'm sure there already is one, and I'm just am unaware of it, but is there like an art wiki, like an art history Wikipedia, just solely dedicated for art? We need to get on that.
I wish.
Yeah.
I mean, there's wiki art, I think it's called. I never use it. I mean, I just always end up using Wikipedia anyways.
For sure.
There's bound to be something. I mean, there's so many, ways to collect and find reference. Yeah. Like all the museums, I think ever since Corona happened, they've started uploading high resolution images of their collections.
Yeah.
It's been a wellspring for me because I've just been collecting left and right. I could use this later. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And finding new people because of it.
That's awesome. Yeah. What's the coolest museum you've ever been to?
I think my favorite has to be the Virginia Museum of Fine Art.
Nice.
They have such a good collection there. When I was going to school in Richmond, they actually put it on in addition to the old museum, and it became twice as big, twice as modern, twice as full of great art. And I used to go there constantly. I would go there all the time. There was even a time period where I would go every single day and go to a specific room where the abstract expressionists were.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a Rothko painting there. And I would stand in front of that painting for like an hour at least every day.
Really?
And just look at it and wonder at it. Which was it was an interesting practice doing that, because, you know, not only do you get to kind of meditate on the painting and try and figure it out, but you could also people watch too. And every once in a while, you'll hear an offhand comment from somebody, you know, a family, a tourist walking through, and they'll say, "Oh, I don't get it. I don't understand. I could do that. I could do that. My 3-year-old could do that."
Yeah.
And so you sit and you look at the painting and you hear these kind of whispers of opinions around you come and go. And then the painting is still there and you're still there trying to figure it out.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, whatever the critique is, to kind of summarize, the piece of art still stands. You know, it's still there. And it maybe on a different level. Maybe your art isn't in like a museum or whatever, and maybe people don't get it, or they think that they could have done it. But then again, why didn't they? You know, whatever critique comes, it's like the fact that was created is a fact, and everything else is just opinion.
Yeah, yeah, that's a statement.
Yeah.
Other than just an opinion, and I think that's one of the things that some people can tend to forget when it comes to, especially things like the abstract expressionist movement and modern art in general, is that those are artists that are expounding on a conversation that's been happening essentially since the beginning of time.
Yeah,
you know, they're boiling down the recipe that's been accumulating. And, you know, I think that the abstract expressionists were essentially kind of like the alchemists of the art world, you know, trying to figure out with as few ingredients as possible, how do I make gold? You know, how do I make something that will really stop somebody and make them wonder?
Yeah, definitely. They, I think that I've kind of changed my thinking on them in particular, you know, over the last 10 years or so. You know, I used to be one of those people being like, I could have done that, you know, or whatever it is, whatever opinion comes up. But I think that they gave permission for people to just fucking go for it, you know?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And like without them, you wouldn't have, again, getting back to this cause and effect thing, I don't think you would have like people who were just self-taught artists in a way, because they're like being real free and sort of deconstructing what it means to paint. And yeah, it's also kind of like the opinions of people. They're coming in like they're like a child who wanders into the middle of a movie or whatever, you know, and they they don't understand the full context of the conversation leading up to that point, and they just see this little snippet of the art history conversation, and they're like, what does that mean, you know?
Yeah.
Which I guess is understandable, but it's also like, maybe sit and listen for a second, watch for a minute, and you'll start to kind of like get it.
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that whenever you hear any news or conversation about the pieces, generally it's about the price. It's about the price tag.
Yeah.
And I feel like that can really negatively taint the original intent of all these paintings, because, you know, then what ultimately comes to mind, instead of trying to parse whatever the painting is this was $20 million. you know?
Yeah,
And when,
yeah.
and when you start off with that, then it's just going to lead to disappointment.
Yeah, for sure.
But then that's a whole different conversation because, those paintings, a lot of them didn't even really originally sell for that much. It's just because of the market doing what it does.
Yeah, the secondary art market.
Yeah. Dun, dun, dun.
Have you looked into, okay, so I got to bring this up because I just feel compelled to, but have you looked into NFTs and all that jazz?
I have, yeah. And I feel like I have an account set up on every single one of them, but I haven't dived in yet. I haven't taken the first step.
For sure.
I think in the beginning I was kind of waiting because there was so much hype. I think it's kind of quieting down now, and I'm
for sure
thinking about actually making a move into that. But I think it's super exciting. I think NFTs are, however you feel about the hype. I mean, it's the same thing as we were just saying with the first thing you think about it is price tag.
Right.
Like what? An artist made this much money off of this? And, I think it can be really lucrative for artists. But the technology behind it, I think, is going to be beneficial for things way beyond art.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like the ownership of like a house or even a car or whatever will eventually just be on chain and verified that way as like a one-of-one token.
Yeah.
And for anybody who's into collecting anything, it could be Pokemon cards, whatever it is. I think all that stuff will eventually be digitized and verified through this new technology.
Definitely.
Yeah. I haven't actually jumped in with any like actual images yet either. I minted a podcast episode as an NFT, just as an experiment.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
How'd that go? How'd the process go?
So I interviewed Allie Grimm, and she, while we were talking, it was all about NFTs. So it was like this meta thing, the whole idea was to make it like so meta that hopefully someone would get it and buy it. Still available, by the way, for anyone listening.
Nice.
So while we were talking, we had the screen share up, and she was remixing the podcast logo, like all while we were talking over like, an hour or so or more.
Yeah.
And so you got the animated MP4 of that remix, and then the unlockable content is the actual audio video episode.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I figured, it's pretty. I thought it was just like a stoned idea I had one night, because I was like, okay, we need to do a podcast about NFTs. And then I was like, what if the podcast was an NFT? And everyone listening to this, who listens every week, I know you've probably seen that episode and heard me talk about it like a couple times now. So I'll move on. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. But yeah, I haven't done any visual pieces yet, because it feels like you were saying, like I did kind of want the dust to settle a little bit.
Yeah.
Just to be sure like what I was getting into. And
I feel like I'm partially waiting for other coins to, start their NFT ecosystems too. Partially because the Ethereum gas prices are all out of control.
For sure.
And I feel like there are a few platforms or ecosystems that are starting to do it. I know Binance is. I'm looking forward to Cardano doing it.
Yeah. Have you heard of Tezos?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, they're doing it, and they're using proof of stake, which is like such a fraction of the energy consumption that that's going on. And so you can you can go to platforms like Hic et Nunc, which is hard to say, and I know it's a Latin thing because the et in the middle is and in Latin, but haven't actually done the research as to what the other two words mean. And then Calumet.io for anyone listening. And I want to like promote that for the people who are really raging against artists who, they're like condemning them for minting NFTs because of the ecological impact. And so just putting that out as a little PSA for anybody interested.
Yeah. Yeah, I have heard some crazy statistics or numbers. I think there was an artist that said the cost of electricity for their studio for an entire year was equal to the input that was needed for minting 2 or 3 NFTs or something like that. I don't know how true that is or who said that, but that's one of the whispers I heard.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'd love to see some like solid numbers and solid studies done on that before I form an opinion.
Thankfully, Ethereum is supposed to be moving towards proof of stake later this year,
for sure,
and that's gonna make it way easier, way less impacting. So I'm really hopeful for that.
Yeah, for sure. It's very exciting, and I just I think I've brought it up for the last like 10 episodes or something.
I mean, it's impressive technology that I've been looking into cryptocurrency in general a lot recently.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get beyond the shock and awe of the prices and how they fluctuate, and you actually look at the technology that it's all supporting, it's incredible.
Yeah.
I think it's going to change the world the same way that the internet did, if not even more.
Yeah. Hopefully better too. Cause you remember the internet in the kind of the early days. I'm sure it was a lot different than it is now. They've kind of, aggregated attention and resources and power, just like it seems like happens a lot, but I think the exciting thing about crypto for me is the ideology behind it. It's basically like sovereign individuals with sovereign financial digital fortresses that can't be compelled to do one thing or another by force. So here for it,
Yeah. Oh yeah. I agree 1000%. I think that's honestly, I think it's kind of inspiring. I think the past few years have been really, I would find a lot of people hard pressed to find the last few years inspiring in any way.
Yeah.
And it kind of feels like a breath of fresh air. Just like all of the possibilities are, they really make me feel hopeful for the future, honestly.
Yeah.
Which, sounds a lot. There's a lot of people that will hear the word cryptocurrency and immediately turn off because I think it has a little bit of a stigma with it. But I'm really hopeful for it, for sure.
Yeah, same here. I think that some of the stigma comes from like people who have vested interests in keeping the, regular status quo system going.
Yeah.
And mixed with people's general anxiety about new stuff or change or technology.
Yeah.
And or
a change to how they value things, because I think that's one of the big aspects, and something that I struggle with a lot personally is value or values in general. How I value something, how I value my own work, how I'm willing to sell my work, how I'm willing to present my work, all those things kind of affect the value. And this is a revolutionary change to what the word value really means. And I think values in general have just been kind of debased for years and years. So it's been an interesting kind of evolution of that. I don't know. Value is a super hard thing to really figure out when it comes to art
Yeah.
and
Well,
in general.
well, yeah, you
Honestly.
can, I mean, you can think about it in so many ways, right? Even just the dark to light scale of values when you're painting, you know,
Yeah.
and, and how, you know, I mean, rules are meant to be broken, but like how you kind of structure your painting and build it up into lighter and lighter values. Um, yeah, I've kind of like had little fleeting thoughts about that I obviously haven't articulated very well yet while painting. Um, but yeah, I think values is such a tough concept because it means so many different things. There's
Yeah.
like,
And I think a lot of it is because, when you think of value monetarily, feels like a shell that's kind of surrounding the artwork.
mhm,
And in some ways, it feels like a distraction. But as an artist, the interesting values, like you were saying, from dark to light, or the various um, boundaries and measurements within the painting, measurement of space, um, breaking the inherent value of those measurements to make a point.
mhm.
Those are super fascinating.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if that even made sense. I feel like I just said word salad, but
I mean, it made sense to me. That just makes me think of like, yeah, there's like this. We use like money as kind of a proxy for what like value really means, right?
yeah, it's an exchange tool.
Yeah.
It's you're exchanging your energy with
Mhm.
another entity.
Yeah.
Um, and when it comes, that can take in many different forms. And there's a similar kind of transaction that happens, I feel like, when you look at artwork. And we essentially have to put a value at the end of it. It's like, oh, this exchange is worth $1,000, $2,000. This transaction that's happening here through this artwork, this kind of portal or exchange or transaction, or
Yeah. Yeah, and the only reason money is used that way, in that energetic way, for like a proxy of what we want, um, is because we all agree on it, and that's what crypto is challenging, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, it'd be like if you did a painting in a totally different way just to see what happened, and then you got this way better result, and you're like, oh, was I? Am I on to something? And that's kind of how I, you know, sort of see the parallels between cryptocurrency and artwork. I'm sure there's many other ways. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It's got a kind of technological grammar to it, cryptocurrency. Um, and, I think when you kind of debase a value, the grammar becomes super basic and unfulfilling.
hmm.
But like the more uses you can get from it, the more intricate ways that you can exchange your energy that create a positive outcome on your life. Why not pursue that and create ecosystems that foster that?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Glad to hear that you're on board too.
100%.
Yeah, I think some of this is happenstance, but I think that some artists are just turned off by it, and I honestly don't know why.
I think I think being an artist, this is something I've struggled with forever, is
Mhm.
hating money. It's kind of hard to
Yes.
make a living if you just hate money.
Yeah, or
You
don't
know?
care about it.
Yeah.
That's sort of.
I mean, yeah.
I feel you, man. Like I find myself in that space a lot. I wish, but maybe that's maybe that's why I'm so drawn to crypto, because I'm like, ooh, I like money now. This is cool. You know, like
Yeah.
it just made it cool for me. And I don't know where it was. It was probably somewhere in my childhood or something where, you know, whatever idea took root in my brain about, maybe I heard someone say money is the root of all evil or whatever. And it's
Yeah.
just been, I've just been recovering from that ever since. And yeah, I think that's a good reason to be on some cryptocurrencies,
Yeah. I mean, at least that money's useful.
Mm-hmm.
Paper money's not useful for anything, honestly.
Yeah. So yeah, speaking of all this technology, where do you see the future of like analog painting? Do you think humans will continue to paint with all the new fun gadgets that are coming out year after year?
Uh, it's hard to say. It's hard to predict. I don't know. Every year I feel more and more like a dinosaur for using paint.
Yeah.
Um, and it's got me wondering, like I recently just got a Wacom or a Wacom tablet
Mm-hmm.
so I could start doing digital stuff, partly because of NFTs. I wanted to make digital work for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so messing with all these new programs and getting the feel for the pen and seeing the possibilities and, how easy it is to use it in the sense that you don't have to set up the paint. You don't have to clean your brushes off. You don't have to like try and keep things from drying too fast or, lasting too long or staying open too long. And then when you bring in things like VR, augmented reality, I'm super excited to see what young artists do with it, or old artists, or anybody. I think it could be revolutionary. But as far as painting goes, I don't know. It's kind of like people saying rock and roll is dead. If you say painting's dead, which people have been saying that for decades now.
Yeah.
And you still see amazing new things crop up every day.
For sure.
I don't know. I honestly don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess it sort of depends, but I mean, painting has been around for so long, man. Like, it's one of the first things that we know that humans did,
Yeah.
And they're drawing little pictographs on caves or on desert walls or whatever. I think there'll always be room for it. It's just I see it like how music did this thing over the past 30 years or so, going from analog to more like electronic and digital. Like, there's room for Tipper, and then there's also room for like Fleet Foxes. You know what I mean? And so I think there'll always be a space for it. I just, it might wane in popularity. And of course, this is using a limited time frame. Maybe somewhere far out into the future, it'll all be virtual reality building and stuff like that. And I'm super excited about it. I think that part about the digital art and the NFT world is so super fascinating to me, because you can literally build a world. It's super cool. And you can show people what you mean. You can be even more dialed in to meaning, and you can rotate your idea or object to be like, okay, now look at it from this side and it looks a little different.
Yeah.
I think
that's an interesting thing in particular, because I think it's like since the beginning of the 20th century, and even a little bit before that with the Impressionists, artists were starting to kind of question the grammar of painting and art in general. They started to question why things had to be so rigid. They started to question why things had to just be from like one angle. You have cubism where it's just the representation of an object, but it's from different angles all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And then that kind of progresses. And then when you think about, art that's made digitally or virtually, it's people that are still questioning those same things. They're saying, why do the dimensions have to just be this way?
Yeah.
Why does it, our viewpoint have to, or our perspective or the colors or, whatever, like it's the next step in the evolution of the grammar of art making, which is, I think it was bound to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that like one of the big drivers of technology is creating things and like for other people to be either captivated by or entertained by. And I mean, I think it's an awesome thing when you can go inside of a goggle headset and just be immersed in this world. I mean, it's super cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also makes me think, like going back to the music parallel, like the interesting thing with like folk music. Folk was really popular at a certain point in time because it was easier for the common person to do. All you would really need is maybe a guitar and your vocal cords, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of progressed over time to like the 80s and 90s when hip hop started being a thing. And all you really needed was a way to record some samples and a microphone.
Yeah.
And then you keep going and it gets to the point where, well, you just need your computer and you need Fruity Loops or Ableton or something.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly with artwork, when you start drawing your bison in the cave, all you need is some charcoal on the end of a stick and you draw. And then now we have a new kind of evolution to a folk way of making art is that, everybody's got a phone or a computer and there's apps on there and you can just download them and you can start making your own art. And it's got all of these capabilities built in. The learning curve is different than if you were to just give a person or make somebody go and pick up oil paint and spend hundreds of dollars on oil paint and, get the setup and ventilation and, all this other stuff. Like spray paint, graffiti, like that's essentially kind of like a folk art.
That's such a great point. Yeah, like the barrier to entry it has become like a lot lower in a sense, and you made the interesting point that it kind of like circled back because from charcoal drawing, in caves, to all you needed was some burnt firewood and you just go at it. And then if you progress and look at, I'm not as familiar with like Eastern art history, but if you look at Western art history, you sort of had to be in a school or a wealthy person's son or whatever to even get a crack at it. I mean, I think Leonardo da Vinci was a pretty cool exception to that because he was like a bastard son of a noble person, so he didn't get the full like, oh no, you can do whatever you want. But my point is that like, we've come back around sort of past the middleman now. And I think that that's what's really interesting about this technology and about NFTs as well, is that you don't need the degree from the Chicago Art Institute or wherever, to get your work out there and to make really cool shit.
Yeah, definitely. You don't need the middleman anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Just need yourself.
Yeah.
What's more inspiring than that?
Not much. I mean, after so long of all that, I think it's very, very inspiring. So is there anything you dislike about the art world?
No,
Yeah.
I can't think of anything.
Yeah. Nice. Okay.
What did you have anything that you were thinking
Well,
of?
we were just talking about middlemen and stuff, and I think sometimes I frame this question differently in saying, "What's like a brutal fact about being an artist um, that people might not know about?"
It's failure happens constantly,
Yeah.
all the time. It's one of those professions where you have to expect to fail, possibly every single day
Yeah.
in some ways.
Yeah.
And it can be very brutal, but the reason why it is that brutal is because it's honest.
Mm-hmm.
It's a form of work that always lets you know how successful you are being and attaining your goals.
Right.
So yeah, I would say just the fact that it can be brutal all the time and you will
Yeah.
fail.
Yeah. Dude, 100%. 100%. And I think that's why like being an artist, part of that is just knowing how to move past the like frustration of failure and getting to a place where you can be pretty stoic about it and just
Yeah.
being like, okay, that was a learning experience. On to the
Yeah.
next thing.
Yeah, I talked to a high school art class, I think about a month ago, and I was trying to come up with things to tell them because, I was coming at it from this perspective of a professional artist. But I was also trying to remember what it was like when I was making art when I was in high school and how I felt about it. And taking into account the self-confidence or the lack of self-confidence that I had with my work.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was trying to think of advice to give them, like the one thing that I could think of is don't be so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
Like I can imagine there's so many things like when you're younger that it's easy to be hard on yourself. But when it comes to creative things, if you beat yourself up all the time, it's just going to make it that much more difficult. It's going to make it that much more painful.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's the failure, right? And that hurts. But then like you add these like layers of your own bullshit on top of it. And,
Yeah.
And you just for no reason or for whatever reason, some sort of cause and effect that reaches so far back into either your life or the life of, whoever came before you. You're like just self-flagellating and you're like, oh, I'm so bad. Oh, and
I think a lot of people feel like as artists, you're supposed to do that, that you're supposed to have, questionable stability. And I think that's because it's so brutal and it's so easy to be unstable.
Yeah.
That it just becomes part of the persona of artist. And I kind of wish that wasn't the case. I kind of wish the idea of the starving artist or the, mentally unstable artist or the, just train wreck tornado of an artist wasn't such a thing, because I don't think I would have adopted those characteristics as much when I was younger.
Yeah,
if it wasn't
for sure.
If it was a more healthy way of looking at it.
Well, and I think when you're young too, you're searching for a persona, right? Like,
yeah,
as you get older, I think for me at least, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, but I think you get a little more knowledgeable about yourself. You're just like, oh, I'm just kind of this dude who has this list of eccentric qualities or whatever, but I'm more or less just like, a normal person. And maybe you're not, and that's fine too. But yeah, I think like being young, you're like, who am I? There's that.
Yeah, it's like at the beginning of our conversation when we were talking about when I was young and experimenting with the boundaries.
Yeah.
I think that those boundaries, the boundaries that you push past, that's what makes your personality ultimately.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And even the boundary of this sort of prepackaged persona that society or whoever gives you about what it means to be an artist or a plumber or a speaker, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that can be seen as like a boundary too, or a mold, maybe a mold to break.
Yeah.
Because there's
Yeah.
no.
I was listening to one of your podcasts from before, and I heard you talking about the question of free will.
Yeah.
And I think that plays a big role into free will because, um, there are so many molds that you can easily fit in, but I don't think there's a mold for free will.
Okay.
When a person has the opportunity to break free from whatever's inevitable, and that breaking free from what is inevitable, I think would be free will.
Yeah, I think there's a paradox between free will and cause and effect. Because I mean, it definitely feels like okay, we definitely have will, right? There's no question about that. But we don't get to choose our parents or I don't think we really get to choose our personality. There's plenty of psychological literature on that and how you more or less come preloaded.
Yeah.
Yeah,
kind of like going back to the Carl Jung and the psyche and the archetypes and stuff. I mean, that makes a similar case.
Yeah,
for sure.
So what I think there is more or less is there's knowledge and the courage to use that knowledge and memory to even remember to use that knowledge in every situation. Right. Yeah. And I think it is more or less cause and effect, but that like, if you can remember that you have willpower, that's the most important thing. And you can have freedom from certain things. I just don't think that like decision making is based on so many factors that it becomes confounding to the point where like a singular self couldn't possibly be aware of all those factors, and two, in the moment of making a decision, analyze all those factors. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a paradox there. And I think it really like rustles people's jimmies when I say I don't believe in free will, or like when it comes up. Because nearly like everything we care about is tied to it, right? Like morals and just values, even getting back to what we were talking about earlier. So I mean, but there's also
there's frameworks that are so embedded, that like when I was thinking about it earlier, thinking about free will, the only really good thing that I could think of was just fighting against the idea of not having free will.
Exactly.
That's what free will would be, because there's so many other things.
Right.
I don't know. That was the only thing I could even come up with.
Right. Well, I think it definitely, like, on the surface is bothersome to like feel like, well, if we get rid of free will, what does that mean? Does that mean we have no control over our lives? And it's like, that's definitely not what I think. It's just, it's maybe it's even more just semantical or something. And I'm just want to feel like I'm smart, but it's definitely scary, because I think we just sort of take it for granted or don't even investigate it a lot of times. But I think it actually allows us for more empathy, right? Like,
Yeah.
because it's so circumstantial with what kind of ideas and time and place and genetics and friends that you'll make throughout your life. That's all just happenstance. And like, you see someone being dumb on the internet and you're like, click on their profile and you're like, oh yeah, Mississippi, or whatever it is, or it could be like me and on the reverse of that, and they're like, oh, it's some hippie dude from Colorado. Of course he would think like that, but
Right.
that gives you like a little more empathy, right? And it removes like the justification for just hating someone because you think that they had the free will choice to be like, I'm gonna make myself into this person, and
Yeah.
it's like,
I'm gonna be born to these parents
It's
in this place.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's exactly that level of if you think about it, it's kind of that ridiculous, to grant someone that agency and even yourself, so like
Yeah.
you can't even claim that you're a fully self-made person. Like, I always think that's hilarious when people say that, like, I'm a self-made man. It's like, okay, you're not just like, in this wave of cause and effect that like we're all caught up in from the Big Bang or whatever you want to call it to now. So yeah, I mean, thanks for bringing that up, because you let me just ramble for a minute. But
yeah, I mean, I was listening to that before and I was just like, I would really love to hear more about your thoughts on it. So thanks for sharing that with me.
yeah, absolutely. And I definitely am just like, to even prove my point further, I hadn't even thought about free will until I heard about it pretty recently, I guess I just sort of assumed that we all had it and, whatever.
Yeah.
But it was laid out in an argument like pretty well. And so I'm basically just like spreading the gospel, so to speak.
That's cool.
But yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate that. Thanks for listening
Absolutely.
too, by the way.
Yeah. That's what I'm here for.
So let's see. I think we can kind of get to wrapping this up. Ask you a couple more questions. Where do you see your art in the next like 5 years? Do you have any dream projects you think about, or?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm planning all the time. Sometimes I feel like I have a good grasp on it, and then some days I feel like I don't know what I'm going to do next, or I don't even know what I'm going to do today.
Right. Yeah.
As far as goals, honestly, my goal now is to work on a painting for as long as I possibly can.
Yeah.
I've kind of been caught up in this high turnover rate for a while, and I'm trying to make things into such a way where I can make a huge painting and take forever on it.
Nice.
But as far as I don't know. I don't plan on building any monuments or doing the world's biggest sculpture with toothpicks anytime soon. So I don't know.
Nice. Well, sweet. Thanks for that super honest answer. Sometimes I know that question can kind of like elicit some like grand answers every now and then. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm constantly trying to evolve and do stuff like that.
For sure.
There's also a characteristic about me where I get bored of things that I'm working on super easily.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I know it's a me thing, but if I came up with an idea that I would do in 5 years, I would be bored of it before I got there.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Oh,
You
I
know?
feel that. That's such a good way to put it. Like, if you plan it, I'm kind of the same way. Like, spontaneity for me is, I mean, like we were talking about earlier, it's good to have some kind of structure there in case your day sucks and you're just like, I'm not feeling it, but at least I have this thing that I can fall back on. But I
Yeah.
think the spontaneity of it all is I mean, it's so crucial in my, you know, my precious little conception of what painting or creativity is, you know.
Yeah.
That's such a good way to put it. And I think that's as good a place as any to end. Let's touch back on your solo show coming up.
Right on. Well, I've got my solo show, Natura Naturans. The opening is going to be on May 15th at 5 p.m., I think.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's Ryan Joseph Gallery in Denver, Colorado. I'm going to be giving a talk there from 5 to 6.
Nice.
And I'll probably ramble about similar things as today. So
sweet.
If anybody wants to go see that, then I'll be there.
Oh, I'll be there. And I'll I think we'll release this podcast like the week before. So next week, not this Monday coming up, but the one after that. So
okay, awesome.
So hopefully, if you're listening to this right now and you're in Denver, I know some of you are, come out to that show, and you can find Andrew at what is it at just Andrew Davis Art on Instagram.
Yep, on everything.
Nice.
I colonized all the Andrew Davis arts on the internet.
Very nice. Well, sweet. Thank you so much again, man, and hope you have a good one.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.
Yeah, you too.